And we had to work very hard. The sanctions still exist. But we took the approach of going to the United States and making the case that Trinidad and Tobago should be given what we call a carve-out. Carry on with your concerns about whatever you think you're concerned about, but give Trinidad and Tobago a carve-out, give us what they call an ofac license, so that we can continue to trade with Venezuela on this product, on this gas field. It took us very many days, very many trips, talking to very many people. During that time, I would tell you, I have spoken to very many Republicans, I have spoken to very many Democrats, I have spoken to virtually every single person in authority in the United States, from the president to the vice president to the Speaker of the House to first-year congressmen and to experienced congressmen, chairpersons of various committees, some of whom came to visit us recently when we had the CARICOM 50th anniversary. You would have seen Congressman Greg Meeks here. He was the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee when his party had the majority. He's now the ranking member, his party being in the minority. We met with Nancy Pelosi, and of course there's one congressperson who I must identify today, Congresswoman Maxine Waters of California, of all places, who stood with us and opened doors with us and helped us to make our argument that we should be given the opportunity to conduct business with Venezuela, notwithstanding whatever issue exists. And at the end of the day, we were able to get an OFAC license. Of course, he said for 2 years, but if Chevron got 6 months and we got 2 years, we thought we were leading the pack. Against that background, we kept in continuous contact with Venezuela. We confirmed to the United Nations that the government of Venezuela was the Maduro government. We made our arguments with Venezuela on all issues. Let it not be said that we have not been speaking to Venezuela on all issues, including the issue with Guyana. But at the end of the day, Trinidad and Tobago stands on its principles, and we are respected for that, regardless of the circumstances. So at the end of the day, the commercial negotiations, which are very hard negotiations, it being the first time that this was going to happen, where Venezuela would have to enter into contracted arrangements to export its gas, not being familiar with the business of exporting gas, talking to Trinidad and Tobago, who has been in the gas business for decades, we were able to come to the table with our experts and their experts, our advisors and their advisors, and hammer out an agreement that allows us today to have the signatures of Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela on this document, which is the Golden Fleece, a license for Trinidad and Tobago to exploit natural gas in a gas field outside our border, inside the border of Venezuela, with the approval of the government and people of Venezuela. And the interesting thing about this is that this agreement is between two sovereign states. It is between the government of Trinidad and Tobago and the government of Venezuela. And we then detail and identify operators of the license. In our case, our partner and operator would be Shell. In Venezuela, it is PDVSA, the Venezuelan state company. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a historic development on a historic day for the people of Venezuela and the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Venezuela by water is 7 miles from Trinidad. 7 miles from Trinidad and Tobago. And to have entered into this agreement in 2023, to open this door, to allow us with the infrastructure on the ground in Trinidad, to access and process the raw material from below the ground in Venezuela, puts the two nations in a position to play a bigger and more beneficial role in the world's economy and for the benefit of the people of Venezuela and Trinidad and Tobago. This Dragon Agreement is the first of what I anticipate will be many between Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela. And it has nothing to do about with today's politics and who's in office today. It has to do between who are the people of Venezuela and who are the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And as long as we remain neighborly, with respect for each other, acting in good order, this is sustainable for a long, long time. For the people of Trinidad and Tobago, it means that we are now in a position to access more gas, to keep us in the business longer. And for the people of Venezuela, it means that they have access to the international market and to benefit from the earnings of these operations. Whether it is government or opposition, this is for the benefit of the people of Venezuela and for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I told you before, I stayed in this office after COVID, or during COVID, because I did not want to leave my colleagues and the country in the middle of a pandemic. And this decision was also one of the things that kept me interested in this office, because I knew that the people of Trinidad and Tobago had a lot riding on this. I ask you today to ignore the naysayers and to accept that this is an extremely important development, if only to preserve the ability to aspire to the quality of life that we had become accustomed to in the islands of Trinidad and Tobago. At this point, I would like to ask the Minister of Energy, who has come from Caracas, as he is there, straight to your press conference to give you further information, and you can put a few questions to him after. Thank you very much. Minister Young.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. And good afternoon to citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, by whatever means you're following us, and members of the press. What the Prime Minister has said in a very eloquent manner is actually humbly a bit of an understatement as to the significance of what has taken place for the people of Trinidad and Tobago, Prime Minister, in the last 21 days, starting with the beginning of December to yesterday's date. Just to give you a quick contextual background, as the Prime Minister identified, we came in. You can go and look at the numbers yourself, because the numbers don't lie, and you will see that gas was on a decline. From 2010, it was at a high in 2007, 2008. By 2010, it had started to decline under 4 BCF a day, and it was on a downward trajectory. And there were no gas contracts negotiated. There was no real hope on the horizon. Immediately, the Prime Minister, as he said, identified this as an area of priority for the government, and he set about working. Critical, as he said, in maintaining lifestyle. And one thing I'd like to add, and it was just a few weeks ago, it became very clear in a discussion with one of our rating agencies. They asked this critical question: how is it with a reduction in your production? Your gas production and oil production have gone downwards. You have managed to maintain the similar levels of revenue as to what you had before. One important point that we need to emphasize here today, Prime Minister, is what we did in addition to the work that I'll come to in a short while to increase production for the future, is we set about renegotiating revenue streams. So even with lower production levels, we negotiated for the people of Trinidad and Tobago better prices for the declining resources that we were selling. And that is how we've managed to get our revenue to stay. As the Prime Minister said, on the 1st of December and thereabouts, after on the 5th of December when we were in London, as he stood here a few weeks ago, that's the next thing I'd like to emphasize. historically we renegotiated Atlantic LNG, which opens up projects like Dragon and others. And again, that was historic, it's never been done in the world. Last night, Prime Minister, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, I can report to you all that after 9 o'clock last night, we managed to culminate 7 years of hard work, and as the Prime Minister has in his hands now, a historic document that has never been negotiated with Venezuela before, which is for the exploitation of natural gas from Venezuela, the export of natural gas from Venezuela to Trinidad and Tobago. And it was yesterday afternoon about this time that point was made to me as we were leading the negotiations, where they said, this has never happened before, as we were discussing and finalizing the terms for the Dragon gas deal. It was in 2016 we signed the first government-to-government arrangement. It was later on that year that a further agreement was signed, and then we moved to a commercial term sheet in 2018. The differences at that time were the license was with PDVSA. Today, the license is no longer with PDVSA. What we had in 2018 was PDVSA as the license holder, and that we, through Shell, would be able to get the gas from PDVSA and bring it to Trinidad and Tobago on commercial term sheets. Unfortunately, as outlined by the Prime Minister, that could not happen because of the US sanctions that were put in place. We never stopped. The Prime Minister has outlined how we worked very hard last year with a lot of meetings. I remember on a particular day, the Prime Minister made no less than 5 speeches to 5 different audiences in the capital of the United States as we persuaded them or attempted to persuade them to give us a carve-out. Again, we were the first people to get an OFAC license for 2 years to do business with Venezuela that came in January of this year. You know, the terms of that license did not initially permit us to pay in cash. We had to pay via humanitarian needs. We had continued to stay engaged with Venezuela. Of course, that presented a bit of a challenge. We did not stop. We kept engaging Venezuela and the United States. And as you know, at the end of September, a very monumental agreement was signed at Miraflores. I signed it on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Minister Telechia signed it on behalf of the people of Venezuela, which was the opening, an agreement with Venezuela that we would exploit their hydrocarbon resources, in particular gas resources, from Dragon field and bring it to Trinidad and Tobago. We agreed the allocation, where the gas would go and these types of things. And also, it was not limited to Dragon. That was the opening, that President Maduro identified this would not only be for Dragon, and that was the framework. Of course, at that stage, you still had the difficulty and the challenge of how to pay for the gas. Shortly thereafter, as a result of 2 requests, official requests by us for amendments, the United States on the 17th of October issued an amendment license that expires on the 31st of October 2025 for Trinidad and Tobago to be able to exploit the gas from Dragon field and to pay for it in US currency, bolivars, any other fiat currency. And that opened up the door. We've been engaged in very difficult negotiations, commercial negotiations. Yesterday, as I met with the Venezuelan team and their 2 consultant reports, it was similar to what we faced with the Atlantic LNG. And again, we were able to use our experience from those negotiations with Venezuela and to determine a pricing mechanism. And today, as at 9 o'clock last night, Trinidad and Tobago now has the license, and it is going to be gazetted as in accordance with Venezuelan law in Venezuela and approved by the government. The license for the exploitation and production of gas from Dragon now resides with Trinidad and Tobago with full commercial terms negotiated. There's one slight change, Prime Minister. We managed to move PDVSA out of the formula, which is even better for us now. And the producers will be Shell and NGC. We managed to negotiate that NGC is going to be in the full value chain, and that we are going to be an equity player now in the production and the exportation of this gas to Trinidad and Tobago at a very competitive price that will benefit both the people of Venezuela and us here in Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, it opens up doors. Immediately we began discussing thereafter what may come in the future, but that is for another time. So today, Trinidad and Tobago, I can say without fear of contradiction, We have the legal documentation in hand that we are now the holders of the license, the official license for the Dragon gas field, and that gas will come to Trinidad and Tobago. We have remained engaged with all of the stakeholders, including the United States, at every step of the way, but most importantly, with the Venezuelan government at the highest levels. And today we have that, in addition to what we announced at the beginning of December, which is a restructured Atlantic LNG, which again has never been done anywhere in the world, that opens up a new market. And just in conclusion, this is only one of the initiatives that the government of Trinidad and Tobago has put in place. So when I hear certain persons saying, well, all of the eggs in one basket, that is the furthest thing from the truth. We are negotiating Calypso, which is deep water gas. We manage, and you've heard the story told by the Prime Minister numerous times, the Manatee field with Shell. And it is last night, I can tell you all this, Shell out of school, when we were exchanging stories after we received the license, the Shell executive, as a result of the relationship with the government of Trinidad and Tobago, has now challenged the Shell workers to see if they can produce Manatee and Dragon as a competition, which can come on faster than the other. So that is only good news for Trinidad, but Manatee, which is going to be the largest gas production in our waters in decades, is a go. They're producing the plans. In our discussions, we intend to have a ship over the Dragon field to do the necessary surveys of where the wells, etc., will go. In April of next year, all of these things are in train. Those are two of the initiatives. You would know that we've brought on for the first time commercial gas from onshore with Touchstone. BP have done a number of initiatives, including their infill drilling. EOG have a rig here that is drilling for the next year, and they're planning to keep it on. They've already drilled 3 successful wells out of 5. They're looking at the other 2, but they expect success, and there are more wells to be drilled. So these are many of the initiatives. We've had a successful, this year alone, shallow water, onshore, shallow water, nearshore bid rounds, where we put out 8 blocks, 16 bids were put in. All of the blocks have been awarded, so you could expect more work there. So in every single area of gas production, we signed an important MOU with Suriname earlier this year because they seem to have significant gas resources. Very quickly on the heels of that, the teams were appointed, and I can report to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, we have had several meetings along with the government of Suriname and their technical people from Statsoli, and we are progressing that. You would have also seen recently players such as Petronas be invited to Trinidad, and they're showing an interest in our shallow water. ENI are also showing an interest. So there is a lot going on for future gas production. It is not only about this cross-border gas from Dragon, which I am very thankful and happy as a Trinidadian. We can now report for the first time there is a license for gas to be exported from Venezuela to monetizing units both at Point Lisas. In Petchem, we have agreed allocation to Petchem as well as to LNG with Atlantic LNG. So it is wholly false to suggest that all of the eggs are in one basket. We have covered all of the bases. And today is a great day for Trinidad and Tobago, in my humble opinion, especially on the heels of what we achieved at the beginning of December. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Minister Young. You would understand that this is not only of interest to us here in the government and among the people of Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela. The commercial international companies that are involved in using these products or marketing them also have an interest. When I was in Canada in the Ottawa CARICOM summit recently, one of the meetings I had was with Nutrien, which is one of the largest fertilizer producing companies in the world. And I could tell you that they were even more excited than we were about the prospect of Trinidad and Tobago getting more gas. And they have indicated to me that given what they have seen and now know to be the successful initiatives for access to Venezuelan gas, Nutrien sees its presence in Trinidad and Tobago as a total positive to attract more and more sustainable investment from this large international company. So there's a knock-on effect.
Correct.
The same thing Mr. Young didn't mention, but I could mention it here, that one of the agreements we got during the restructuring of Atlantic LNG was that Atlantic LNG, the processing plant to create LNG for export, which hitherto only processed gas from its shareholders. The new agreement allowed third-party gas to come to the plant and be processed by arrangements to be worked out. So it means that companies that are out there exploring, especially those in the offshore and the deep offshore, they can confidently go about investing their money in these new horizons, knowing that if they are successful in the exploitation and they find gas, that gas can find a place at the LNG plant in Point 14 to get its way to market. And that is very important, because if you find gas or oil and you have no mechanism or outlet for it, it remains in place. Need I remind you that the North Coast Marine area, north of Trinidad, where the gas was found by Deminex and Agip in the 70s, that gas remained in place unexported until BG came and took part in the creation of Atlantic LNG 1. So now that we had done what we just did, which is to restructure the LNG business to allow third-party gas to go to Atlantic LNG, all the companies working offshore, if they do find gas and do have gas, they have a way to the market. And that will encourage investment, because there's no risk of your gas being stranded in the event that you find and have no access to market. So all of these are good news for Trinidad and Tobago. And the agreements, I should tell you, part of the vision is to make Trinidad and Tobago, especially Point Lisa's, Point 14 as they exist now, to make our country the manufacturing and exporting hub for hydrocarbons in the northern part of South America and the Caribbean islands. That is our vision. And all the work we've done in the last 6 or 7 years is to materialize that. And that is why we have engaged with Barbados by way of a memorandum of understanding. Exploration is now taking place in the Barbados offshore acreage. In the event that they find gas, we are already in place by a memorandum of understanding with the government of Barbados that we will seek to find their surplus gas, making its way to Trinidad and Tobago. We've done the same thing with Grenada, where exploration is taking place, that we have in place a memorandum of understanding, because we internationally are a country with great experience in the pipeline business. So wherever the gas is found in or around the region near to us, because we have the experience of the pipeline business, we can pipe that gas to Trinidad and Tobago and be the producer of finished petrochemical products, LNG, and get it to the international market. We have an MOU with the government of Suriname, where they've been finding some significant volumes of gas, and it's all about pipelines and commercial business. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is what we have been focusing on very much for the last few years, because without it, I want to invite the people of Trinidad and Tobago to envisage a future, 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, without being able to access a revenue stream as we have been accustomed to in the last 25 or 30 years. And if you think 5 years or 10 years is a long time, just ask yourself where you were last 5 years ago. And if you could find that place, say that today was the day when that business would have ended. That gives you an idea of how it goes. Ask yourself where you were 10 years ago. Our reserves, as we know them now within our border, if it is not augmented, if we do not have great finds within our border, 10 years from today, our reserves would have run out. And we will then be without that. That is why this issue has attracted so much attention and absorbed so much effort from this government at this time, because this was, as far as we are concerned, one of our priorities. And thankfully, we've got the cooperation of very many people. We have a lobbying firm in Washington who we pay to lobby for us. Today I want to acknowledge their presence and the hard work they've done in Washington and New York. It's called The Group. You may Google it if you wish. The Group. It's a lobby group in Washington, because in America it's a very serious business. You can't lobby without declaring your business and being registered. They opened so many doors for us. And all the doors that were opened in Washington were important in getting us to be able to get to this position in an environment where Venezuela is still under sanction by the United States and its business being curtailed. But we were able to get a carve-out to allow us to do business while the sanctions remain in force. We have not removed American sanctions. What we have done is earned an opportunity to work while the sanctions are in force, but not applying to us. All that's left for me to do here, ladies and gentlemen, before I take a couple questions from you, is to thank a member of the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago, Minister Young, who, by virtue of his personal competence and professional expertise, has done yeoman service as a member of the Cabinet in this very complicated environment, leading the Trinidad and Tobago effort in these matters. I want to thank him very sincerely as a member of our Cabinet, and who has done well for the people of Trinidad and Tobago who depended on us to get these things done, to keep our people whole in a very, very stormy environment. If you have any questions, we'll take them now. And you could indicate who you're putting your question to.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister. Good afternoon, Mr. Young. I wish both of you all and your respected families all the best of this season. Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Prosperity and brightness in 2024. Mr. Young, would you please provide us with some details of the license that you signed last night? For example, how long is this license for? When is Shell's final investment decision expected to be made? If PDVSA is not in the picture, who represents Venezuela? You spoke about an equity...
Yeah, that's three questions there, so let me, if I may answer them. It's a 30-year license. PDVSA not being in the picture because we are now the license holders. The Ministry of Energy equivalent in Venezuela represents them. It's no different to in Trinidad and Tobago, where we grant and negotiate PSCs or E&P licenses. And then, what was the second question, sorry?
Final investment decision.
Yes, well, of course, as you would know with these things, the final investment decision will come once they've done the surveying of the gas fields. These are fields that already have wells drilled in them, so we need to check the asset integrity. There's a minor complication there as well, but all of the technical work has started and is progressing, so they will take the final investment decision sometime after the surveys have completed. I never am going to put a time frame now because I don't know what that unknown is, but I can tell you we're pushing them hard and we're working, and I'm very happy that there's now this competition with both Manatee and Dragon to bring gas to market. And what that gas can mean when you run the figures is close to 1 BCF of gas coming in from those two fields as a start.
May I just add here, Anthony, when we first had this discussion with Shell, because Shell is our partner on the Hibiscus platform.
Correct.
And this discussion first started at a time when the energy market was very low, oil price was very low, and Shell indicated to me in London that they were losing $2 billion a day. But these are temporary things because the market goes up and down. But what I did come away from that meeting with, even in that very difficult environment, was a commitment from Shell that if we are able to get agreement from Venezuela to access the known reserves in Venezuela in Dragon, that Shell would be good for what is required to go forward. And that commitment still stands.
Absolutely.
So Shell is a partner with us, not starting with this, but starting with the partnership on the Hibiscus platform within Trinidad and Tobago, just off the Bocas there, right? That's where we start. And that is where it's 17 kilometers from the Venezuelan field. So we did have, what we did, we leveraged what existed. We created a narrative and sold it to the people who saw the logic of it. We said to Shell, look, we are here in Hibiscus, running out of gas at NCMA and elsewhere. Let us work together in accessing gas that's across the border. And Shell, even in a difficult environment, agreed to work with the government. When we went to Venezuela, we were able to say to the government of Venezuela, we would like to have access to this field on a commercial basis. We have an operating partner who's already in partnership with us. And we were able to persuade a reluctant Venezuela to work with this arrangement. That's what it is.
With regard to the geopolitics of this issue, does Trinidad perceive that its new relationship with Venezuela is going to have any impact on the Venezuela-Guyana issue?
Well, we have no new relationship with Venezuela, you know. Our relationship with Venezuela is an old one. And I recall in this very building, it might have been 4 years ago, entertaining, I think, 15 or 16 American generals and admirals who came to visit me and asked the same question. And I had to explain to them that we don't have a new relationship with Venezuela. Trinidad and Tobago's relationship with Venezuela has been very old. Only recently, during the disturbance in Venezuela, where so many people came to us that we eventually had to stop the flow and put Venezuelans on visa. Up until then, the arrangement between Trinidad and Tobago, a British colony, and Venezuela was pretty much an open arrangement. When we became independent, the arrangement that persisted up until that visa arrangement was that Venezuelans came here at will, can stay for 2 months and return. And of course, since we became independent, while we were cognizant of Venezuela's concern about its borders around the region, we maintained a respectful and sovereign relationship between Trinidad and Tobago, the sovereign state, and Venezuela. So this is not new. What is new is the exploitation of commercial possibilities. That is what is new. And I want the people of Trinidad and Tobago to understand that. Here it is. We need our earning capacity strengthened and secured. And we looked to a neighbor that had raw materials, and we entered into what is in effect a brilliant commercial relationship, which was counter to what existed before, where the Venezuelans probably felt that one day they will do what we have done in Trinidad and Tobago. But this didn't happen overnight. The coming into being in Trinidad and Tobago of a policy in the 70s to compress the low-pressure offshore gas and bring it to shore and start to produce fertilizer from gas is where it all started. Because after that, when we found high-pressure gas that we look for individually, we then got into the business of producing methanol, producing urea, and so on. So we needed more and more of this gas. So in other words, rather than flaring gas, where gas was a nuisance, we converted it to using gas, where gas is a raw material that contributed so much to the economy of Trinidad and Tobago. So it's not new. It's a continuation of a policy which has worked well for us. But of course, we are exploiting a wasting resource. So there came a time when the volume available to us had fallen so low that it became of great concern to us. And what we have done here is to find additional resources. And fortunately, we have been able to get the agreement of the government of Venezuela to go along with us in giving us access and giving us this future.
I would like to go a little further, actually, take the geopolitical question a little closer to Caracas, because I read some news report that was suggesting President Maduro was banning the lady who, I'm not sure if this is correct, but I did see something that putting a ban on the lady who'd been nominated by the opposition from her being a valid candidate for the election due next year. And I'm not sure if this is correct, but I just wanted to check that if everybody is happy with the Venezuelan domestic politics in terms of us having the OFAC license from the US that had been, contingent on.
Now, let me say something here, and I hope it encapsulates all of this and for all time, because we don't intend to be answering this question on a daily basis. Recently, it was 3 weeks ago, a former Foreign Secretary of the United States was buried. And I think his understanding of international relationships was that countries don't have friends, they have interests. Those are not my words. Those are the words of a very prominent former United States Secretary of State. And I could tell you, while we in Trinidad and Tobago want the best for the people of Venezuela and will continue so to do, it is our position that the selection of a government in Venezuela is a matter for the people of Venezuela. In the event that those policies and programs run counter to our principles, as we subscribe to the democratic principles, we also acknowledge our place as a commentator and not an enforcer. We understand that where interests are concerned, we have designated no nation as having most favored nation status. It is common knowledge that a democracy like the United States, struggling to preserve its democracy, has offered most favored nation status to a communist country, China, the 2 largest economies in the world. And of course, if we are dissatisfied with the outcome of an election in Venezuela, we are simply bystanders commenting on it, because we subscribe to the United Nations principles of non-intervention and non-interference, and that difficulties should be solved by dialogue and not violence. Those are the principles that we subscribe to. And that is why, when there was an attempt to overthrow the Venezuelan government by force, to bring about regime change by force, you saw Trinidad and Tobago leading the CARICOM delegation to the United Nations to object to that, even though we may have reservations about electoral practices. And we also will be leading no trumpet to overthrow any government in Washington. And we preserve our special relationship with the government and people of China, as made for us by Dr. Williams, our leader, an eminent historian, who, when the rest of the world supported Taiwan as China, Dr. Williams, speaking for Trinidad and Tobago, made the case for China, Beijing, China, to take a seat at the United Nations under a one China policy. And those are our principles. Those are our practice. and we preserve the interests of the people of Trinidad and Tobago first and foremost within those principles. So we will not be answering this question on a daily basis.
Mr. Young, how soon is natural gas expected from Dragon?
You sound like David Leader.
As know. Anthony, as you would know, covering energy matters for a long time, those predictions are something that can contract, meaning it can move to the left and come in quicker, or it could go out. Let's wait on the surveys of the field. That will give us a much better idea. I can tell you, including in conversation with Shell at 11 o'clock last night, we are putting all the pressure that we can to bring it to the left within a 2-year period, but we need to survey, have those fields surveyed, do the asset integrity, and also get the items, the long lead items, the drill ships, the pipelines, etc. in place. So now is not a time to try and make those predictions until we have more information.
Well, Anthony, the way these things go, it's all commercial and all business. There are a number of
variable
contracts for drill ships in the region within our territory. And the various companies talk to one another. And we talk to all of them on an ongoing basis. So what you need to have to work out is what is available. Do we have the drill ships within the region? Do we have the contracts that are ending that we could continue, and so on and so on? And it's all within what is doable with an intention to do it in the shortest possible time. So to try to answer your question today and give you a date would be spurious accuracy. But what we are doing is seeking to exploit the fact that there's a lot of activity taking place now within our border and nearby. And therefore, we'll want to bring that environment to bear on this new development where add the Dragon field to the work that is going on here. And we could already see where it is possible to shorten the time that it would have taken by virtue of the parties being able to use resources that otherwise would not have been available, but that might be available in the region. So by the time we get to, I would say, the second quarter of next year, by the second quarter of next year, we'll be in a position to answer that question specifically about time and date, because the companies would have been able to work out a relationship between the contracts that are available, the vessels that are available, and who can break, who ends, and who can go where.
And just to add to that, Anthony, what the Prime Minister has said, which is completely correct, you would have seen recently, just before we went up to London, Shell award the contract to McDermott for Manatee. So there are synergies, there are economies of scale that we are trying to leverage and exploit in everything.
What does this signing mean for the average Trinidad and Tobago citizen?
Let me answer that one. It means that at worst, we are aiming to preserve what we have now. Because the first thing you have to do if you're bleeding is to stop the flow. And then you work towards the healing and returning to normalcy. What we're aiming to do is to protect our revenue stream. And if all goes well, as the economists always say, if all things being equal, which they never are, of course, you know, they never are, but it's good for the equation that you'll be using, all things being equal, we are hoping that sometime in the not too distant future, the flow of gas to our infrastructure would be such that we could return to some level of gas consumption at the processing end that would put us in a better position that we are in today. Right? May I remind you, I saw a political leader on our local platform say that the Prime Minister say that, I should forget that because it doesn't make any sense. And I'm not good at talking things that don't make sense. But let me put it this way. At peak, given the infrastructure we have in the country, one of the arguments we use with the Americans when we talk to them at length in recent months is that we are the only country in the world with spare capacity
next to proven
to handle raw.
Next to proven reserves, that's the equation.
We have spare processing capacity in Trinidad and Tobago next to proven reserves.
Correct.
To produce products that the world needs. And I'm talking in the context of the Ukraine war and the context of European countries having difficulty finding the gas that they need. So, because we have that capacity, when we used it to its fullest, we were consuming 4.2 billion cubic feet of gas per day. And I want to repeat that so that other political aspirants in Trinidad and Tobago will not misrepresent what I've said. We have built capacity that could handle up to 4 or 4.1, 4.2 billion cubic feet of gas per day. That's what we have. If you have the gas to work at that level. Today, we are consuming only 2.6 or 2.5 billion cubic feet of gas per day. Not million, as the political leader of the new party said. It's billion, billion cubic feet. The reason why we're only consuming 2.5 or 2.6 billion cubic feet per day in Trinidad and Tobago now is because that is all the gas that the fields can produce. So if we find additional gas to maintain that level, that is a good thing. Because remember, if you don't find the gas as you consume, the level will keep falling. And then if we find substantial amount of additional gas both at home and abroad, we not only will be able to maintain that level, but the prospect of raising the level of consumption would be our target. Raising it. So anything that takes us up beyond 2.6 to 3 to 3.5 to 4, that's going in the right direction. And the only way we can do that is to find additional gas to replace what we are using and to fill the built capacity that we have in the country. And that is where Point Lisas and Point 14 come in. Point Lisas petrochemical companies and Point 14 LNG. That is what has been exercised in the government. What this means is that we have gas coming in, and every molecule of gas that comes in is useful in first and foremost preserving the level that we are at whenever it comes. Because by the time the gas comes in from Dragon, the level may be different to 2.6. But whatever it is, the incoming gas will preserve that level. And then as we increase the inflow from that source or any other source, we seek to turn it around and increase it to other levels. But we do know that we have built capacity of approximately 4 billion cubic feet per day. And that gave us some leverage at this time to argue. There's one other point I want to raise, because it's important for the people of this country to understand what is happening to us. We are the owner by 10% ownership in the Train 1. When these gas curtailments began to occur and became a part of the conversation and the correspondence between the government and the companies in Point Lisas, that there isn't enough gas coming to us and we need more gas, we were told then that the reason for this problem is temporary. And when it's all about maintenance of the facilities offshore, and when the maintenance is finished, the production will go back up and the problem will disappear. That is one of the biggest misrepresentations ever made to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. The problem is then that we discovered that it was not maintenance. It was a depletion of the fields. And therefore we had to explore for more gas or find new gas that was confirmed abroad, like Dragon. Otherwise, we could easily end up in a situation where plants were closing because the gas wasn't there. And worse than that, as the gas wasn't supplied to these plants, there were contracts in place through the National Gas Company, where if the gas was not supplied,
damages,
there were penalties to be attributed to the National Gas Company. So those penalties started to run. By the time we came into office, those penalties stood at
$8.85 billion.
So the companies that didn't get the gas in their contract
Claims.
were looking to NGC for reimbursement of $8.8 billion for NGC's inability to supply the gas. We had to sit down and raise arguments, open opportunities, and renegotiated away all those claims.
Correct.
That's what we did. We negotiated away over $8 billion in claims.
Correct.
On the people of Trinidad and Tobago through the NGC. And we did that by speaking in the context of partnership. We created the conversation of, don't kill me, because if I'm dead, I'm of no use to you. But if you partner me, both of us could live.
Correct.
In an environment where both of us could profit. And you would have heard me saying to the companies that work in Trinidad and Tobago that this is now a conversation about partnership. It's no longer about a government seeking to extract taxes from you and then you find a way to evade the taxes. But if we are partners, then you got to look out for me as I look out for you. And it's in that context that we were able to impress upon these countries to partner with the government of Trinidad and Tobago. And if you prosper, then we must prosper too. And if there's risk to be had, we share the risk and not tell me that we are not sharing enough risk with NGC and therefore the NGC should be removed from the business. Those are the complexities of the conversation. And I did so on the basis that the people of Trinidad and Tobago's interests must always come first. And that is what allowed us to be able to change the conversation. And without breaking a single contract,
Correct.
we were able to get agreement for all these fundamental changes.
How much natural gas is the Dragon expected to produce at peak?
At peak, we're aiming to start and to build up to about 350 million scuffs. But as I say, when you get to the engineering designs, we are going to be looking at additional capacity there, trying to see what could come in the future. So it could go up to about 450 million scuff, but the figure we have in mind is 350 million.
And again, I want to come in here again to emphasize that this is a commercial arrangement. And Venezuela has large reserves in eastern Venezuela, which are nowhere near market. The fact that Dragon is now going to be coming to market raises a positive come hither flag to all those who have gas in eastern Venezuela. So this is not just about Dragon. It's about Trinidad and Tobago, as I said earlier on, being a hub for marketing the gas within this general region, because we have what it takes now to market that gas.
And who's going to own the pipeline from the Dragon field to
Shell and NGC.
In what equity partnership?
Those things are subject to them getting over their NDAs and that type of thing.
Will NGC be the majority shareholder of the pipeline?
For two reasons, I'll tell you. One, if you are going to be the majority shareholder, you've got to put out the majority investment and take the majority risk. Because of the importance of this to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, we have to always limit our risk exposure. Sometimes we can overdo it by being risk averse, and that is why we didn't end up with shares in trains 2 and 3 at an earlier time. But I can tell you, we will take as much shareholding as is available to us, as we believe is reasonable risk for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. The government of Trinidad and Tobago doesn't go out there drilling wells and saying that if we drill a well, we'll earn all these millions and billions. Because we also know If the hole is dry, you would also have lost millions and billions. So what we do, we balance that risk. But we are not shy in taking the shareholding, and we will ensure that we are a substantial partner.
Prime Minister, if I may also add to exactly what the Prime Minister has said, this is not the only deal and transaction that NGC is looking at and working towards. So in the whole balancing act, we need to have capacity and capital to go into other areas that hopefully will come to fruition.
Recently, Anthony, I heard one of our national narrative makers saying that $100 million is what we don't parliamentarians speak like that. To me, it's quite annoying, right? Because they talk about things that they don't know anything about.
Correct.
But they influence the population's psyche. $100 million for the pipeline.
Yeah, they just came up with a figure. Correct.
Just pull a figure out of the air. The last time we discussed this, the pipeline from Dragon to Hibiscus to Point 14 was substantially more than that.
Correct.
Enough to make the government of Trinidad and Tobago say, we don't have that money. And if we are to get that money, we have to borrow it. And if we borrow that kind of money to invest, it will have other consequences on the country. So we have to look at the broader picture, and this is not the only thing that the government is engaged in.
Correct.
The government is engaged in a number of other things. So we have to make sure that we prioritize and that we take a reasonable amount of involvement. But where the government is strong is on policy and, of course, diplomacy. Shell couldn't have got into this without Trinidad and Tobago.
And that was set up to yesterday, Prime Minister, by the Venezuelans.
Right? With all the money that Shell has, Shell couldn't get into this arrangement without being a partner of Trinidad and Tobago. And having said that, I want to congratulate the Foreign Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Emery Brown, who has done yeoman service in preserving CARICOM and Trinidad and Tobago. And I want to take the opportunity here too, at this moment, to thank my CARICOM colleagues, a couple of whom ought to be identified for speaking up for Trinidad and Tobago when we fought this fight in Washington to get this license, get that ofac license. I speak here specifically about President I.A.N of Guyana. I speak here specifically about Prime Minister Mia Mottley of Barbados and Prime Minister Brown of Antigua. These are people who spoke loudly in support of Trinidad and Tobago's position as we fought this fight to escape the strictures of the American sanctions. Thank you very much. You have one more question, Anthony.
Thursday night's signing of the license for the Dragon, what does it mean for the future of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago?
It means a whole lot. It means that we could plan a future based on prospective revenues that would not have been on the horizon if we didn't have access to these raw materials. I want the people of Trinidad and Tobago to see natural gas coming from Venezuela as a raw material. Right now we import lumber from Venezuela. We import pine from the Venezuelan pine fields. And we use those pines to make wood products and we export it. That's lumber. See the same thing with the raw material, gas. The gas comes into us as raw material. If it has liquids, we extract the liquids. That has very high value, and then the dry gas goes to LNG, and it becomes the LNG for export. And the more that we handle, the more revenue will come to us and will come to the people of Venezuela. A simple formula like that. Raw material to like a factory. The LNG plant in Point Lisas is like a factory. It uses its processes, chemical processes, and it converts the LNG, it produces the raw natural gas to LNG that can go into a tanker, that can go anywhere in the world. Once it gets into that tanker, it's now available to the world market. And of course, When we talk to you again sometime, we talk about one of the things we have not mentioned, we've made changes in our marketing arrangements. Because one of the changes that we've made, prior to us coming into office, the oil companies used to market our minister's share
Correct.
of the gas. And of course, you know what that means. We've changed that. We now market our own share. And as a result of that, we get access to a better price in the marketplace, selling it to the very people who were marketing it for us before. So we made some substantial progress, but there's a lot more to be done. And the future, while it's not a boom, but it's a brighter future as of today. I want to wish all of you in this season of festivities and of Christmas in Trinidad and Tobago a very Merry Christmas. And if I don't see you before the New Year, a bright and prosperous New Year. Thank you very much.